Oh,
Hey, brother. Welcome.
oh wow. So you're right early in the morning.
Yeah, man. But I'm usually pretty productive in the morning though. Like mentally, I'm quite switched on in the morning. So I like to get a lot of stuff done. That's usually when I
Right.
write is in the morning. Like at night, my head doesn't usually work.
Oh wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm
Hmm.
I'm exactly the opposite. I cannot wake up past like 7 a.m. Anything earlier than 7, I'm toast for the rest of the day. But
Damn.
I'll be up until like 2 in the morning. And sometimes some of the best stuff that I've written has happened at like 2, between the hours of 2 and 4 in the morning. So I guess everyone's different, but
Hmm.
that's good for you, man. I hear folks who are productive in the morning are more productive overall. So you
I
guys
don't
got a
know,
few
man.
hours.
I don't know. Like I know loads of people that can like they end up writing some absolutely incredible things at like some ungodly hour at night. You know what I mean? But for me, I don't know. It just works. And as soon as I have that big meal in the evening, I am pretty much toasted. Like you might as well just put me down for the night because my brain will just not work.
Yeah,
It's quite
just
it's
swaddle you
interesting.
up in a blanket and send you off into the eve.
Yes, that's exactly right. So like I'm really interested of like how you got started and why you got started of just like putting pen to paper, you know what I mean? Because it's personal, but it's not personal at the same time because obviously everyone else reads it, but it goes through the medium of like written or spoken word. So we can kind of like detach ourselves away from it. But I guess give I'll give you some time to like explain who you are, why you got into it, what you do, and all that type of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So to break it down, like in the way that you said it, so I'm John Anderson, and yeah, I don't know what I should say about myself. I was born in the small city of Silver City, New Mexico, which if you don't know where that is, you probably never will because it's a very small city. It is not huge. And I was raised until up until the age of 5 in Lordsburg, New Mexico, which if you've never heard about that, count yourself lucky. And also, you'll never hear about that either because that's even smaller than Silver City, which is how most cities in New Mexico fare. You know, we're out in the west of the desert, and so our cities are few and far and in between. And where they exist, you're like, how? You know, where's the water around here? How you guys live in? But so anyways, that's and then I moved to Las Cruces, which again, small city, but that's where I currently live, which is Spanish for the crosses, and that's where I am now. And so yeah, that's just a bit of my background. I've been in the Christian faith for most of my life. I would say probably all of it, but really didn't start actively practicing and involving it in my creative side up until about I mean, generally for a while I wrote plays and scripts, but
Wow.
now I do, as you can see, like books and poetry. And I feel like those are the more powerful stuff. My plays and scripts are mostly just like um, stuff for me, like to show how awesome I was. So I wouldn't say that was super involved with my faith, but the stuff that I do now, obviously, if you read it, it is. And so that kind of leads me into your last question, which is like, what got me into doing it, what got me started on Instagram to start like sharing this stuff and how it goes from like personal to not personal and like what that's all about. So um initially I had started writing in like the poetry I started last year, and I also did my book last year as well. Coronavirus had just struck. I don't know if you have to bleep that out because I know that like YouTube doesn't like that word. Um, but you know, coronavirus had hit, and I had started writing because I mean, what else was I going to do besides lose my mind? and and so it was actually pretty interesting because that's actually what started to happen. As you spend all this time alone, and when you're living in a busy world, you don't have to worry about the thoughts that you have and like having to address them.
Mhm,
But because of the fact that we were all quarantined and the world seemed like it was falling apart into like a literal apocalypse,
mhm,
um, I started to get to myself and I started to finally address those things that were really wrong with me, and also start losing to them a bit as well because the sins of my past, so to speak, as I like to call it, or just the deep-seated issues that I had been dealing with for so many years. Well, they finally got brought out. So the only way that I felt like I could process that was through the poetry. And I'm just kind of weird like that. Like everything that I process through life, I do through art. There's no other way I can do it. Like I can talk to someone and I feel a little better, but in the end, I just end up being like, that person didn't know what they were talking about. What I have to say in my head is a lot more important,
Mm.
you know? And so like, uh, the poetry started that way. And I was never going to share it, by the way. That's why I thought it was interesting, because you're like, well, it's personal, but it's not. And I was like, if it were up to me, it would still be. If it were up to me, I would like have not shared it with anyone. I would have kept it for myself and been like, this was for me to survive. And that's all it ever was meant to be. And it would have never gotten out to people. And so, yeah, about I think it was 7 or 8 months now, maybe. I'm not too sure. I started really going at Instagram and really trying to share my poetry and this book that is about to release with people. And it's been great. It really has helped a lot of people, I believe. At the very minimum, people seem to really enjoy the stuff that's put out there. And so that's really what it's all about. It makes me feel better. It makes me feel like it was all worth something. Gives you a bit of the it puts a little bit of a buffer to the existential crisis we all come into, which is, what am I doing here? And so yeah, I think that's the best summary I could give. I think I've rambled off long enough now, but yeah, that's basically a quick summary of how I got started, who I am a little bit, and what I'm all about, so to speak.
Mm. That's beautiful, man. Like you said about you expressing yourself through art, like that's exactly right. It's expression, right? It's being able to harness some sort of emotion and use it rather than bottle it up inside, and then that bottle inevitably gets shaken up through experiences in life, and then the problems get worse and worse and worse, and then eventually you either take it out on yourself or you take it out on other individuals around you. So it's about being able to express yourself, whether it is through, physical art, abstract art, whether it's like written art like poetry, like plays or anything like that you were talking about, or even working out. You can look at that as an art form. It's a sense of physical expression. It's using the emotion in a physical realm rather than through a written realm, whether it's from a verbal realm or whatever. Um, and it's true, man. Like I got a very, very similar story. That's the why I did it is just expression, trying to figure some things out, trying to deal with it and trying not to go absolutely crazy in the meantime.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I 100% agree. It's actually interesting you mentioned that about working out, because I know that, like sometimes you hear working out and for some reason it has like this weird rep about it, where
Mm.
it's like, well, nowadays it's actually more like, oh, that's so cool. Like, good for you. You're really taking care of your body. But I remember a time when, like, if you were exercising, and maybe this is just in my own personal life, because Christian folks can sometimes be a little overzealous in this way. But like it's true. Like, it's an outward expression of an inward work. That's what I like to call it.
Yeah,
If
man.
you're taking care of your health, and you're taking care of your eating habits and your body, then you're more than likely very good up here, and also very good in here as well. And so I do the same. I love to exercise. I go play basketball and I do body workouts and things like that. So
Hmm.
yeah, I totally get it, man. There's thousands and maybe even millions of ways to express yourself
Hmm.
these days.
Yeah, 100%. It's trying to break down that barrier, right? Of you have to live a certain way, have to be a certain type of person, have to do a certain type of thing, and kind of live in this kind of like boxed format. Um, and like I was having a good conversation with a very good mate of mine recently, and he was like, "All right, imagine that you're in a box." It's like, okay, I'm in a box. I was like, all right, cool. What's around? I'm like, well, four walls. It's like, yeah, okay. Now is there a roof? And I was like, no, there's no roof on the box. It was like, okay, well now stand up. I was like, okay, I'm stood up in a box. It's like, well, what else is around? I was like, well, there's a lot more things outside the box. He was like, exactly. Get outside the fucking box. I was like, oh wow. It's all down to perspective. You can you can get yourself out of the box if you need to, you know.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that a lot. I really like that analogy or metaphorical analogy. I don't know, but that's actually, yeah, that's awesome, man. I really like
Mm.
that. I may use that one of these days, and if I do, I'll be sure to credit you.
Do it, man. I'm sure you'll be able to portray it in a much more poetic format rather than cursing every couple seconds. But that's who I am. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. You gotta express yourself in the way that you know.
That's exactly right, mate. Like, yeah, yeah. It's quite funny, right? You know, it's looked upon very like downward in some regards in some cultures, and then in other ones it's kind of like the way of life. Like I'll use Manchester for example, like the city I grew up in and the city I came out of, like northwest of England, and like swearing is is language, you know what I mean? It's how you express yourself verbally. And then I left the city, went to the south, like came over here, been to South Africa, been all around Europe and that, and you go to different places and you're just like, oh shit, like they are taking this the wrong way, and I'm just kind of expressing myself in a way that I know best, you know. And then you kind of like you open your eyes to other cultures, and then you're a little bit less ignorant. You're like, oh, I might have to adapt the way I verbally express myself because I'm coming across in a way that I don't want to come across.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it all comes down to to the evolving of a culture, I suppose.
Mm,
Because yeah, I mean, everybody is raised in an environment, and that environment shapes who you are to become. And in the end, it all comes down to, well, do you want to continue to be part of that culture, part of that environment, or do you want to change and adapt into something else?
mm,
And so that's always a pretty interesting thing. Um, Expression is pretty much similar in that way, I think, for a lot of things, especially nowadays, because we live in a time where you can say a certain thing, and if society, if I'll put little accents on society, because
yeah.
I mean, what really is that, but but if society doesn't like it, then you have to change it. And you see that all the time with the big folks up in Hollywood or in politics or whatever. They have to constantly apologize or change names of certain things or do different things because people don't like it, because it's not part of it's not part of the culture. If it makes you feel any better, though, it appears that uh, swearing is a very common thing that people are doing these days. At least in America, I don't know. In America, the language is slowly devolving into English, 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 swear word in English, English, English.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
depending on the audience you're talking to, it is slowly, the grammar, the lexicon of the younger minds is definitely getting smaller.
But
But
yeah, like you said, it's the evolution of a culture, and it's the evolution of like spoken language, I guess. Like
yeah,
you wouldn't write it down in a piece of literature, and kind of like the way I write and the way I talk is vastly different. Like probably light years different. You know what I mean? Like so fucking different. However, I wouldn't talk the way I write.
that's true. Yeah, that's interesting how you get like a second voice in there somewhere or something
Mm.
like that. This inner voice that kind of like speaks for you.
Mm. Um, and I think it's shaped from experiences too,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, what was that?
I think it's I think it's shaped from experiences too, right? With like where you like the whole nature nurture thing. I think it's shaped from that nurture side of what you're around, where you come up, where you grow up, the people that you've knocked around with, and past experiences throughout. Like it ends up subconsciously altering the way that you'll end up talking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's like the difference between like the human nature and then the alternative nature, or something like that. And the way that I best conceptualize it is, and this is basically just for me personally, because I'm sure you've been through my page a little bit, so you know what I do, you know what my end game goal is for most of this, for most of the work that I put out there.
Mhm.
And so one thing that I'm always constantly reminding people of is I'm saying, you know, someone will say, oh, I love the words that you speak, like your words are so amazing and they really touch me. And I'll always be like, well, it's not my words,
Mhm.
it's I'm just a vessel God's using to get those words out there. And I say that in a spiritual sense, but almost in a literal sense too, because when I write, you know, like I put myself in this place and there's like this inner voice that kind of tells me what to put down. And it's very strange, but it's not like when I put my pen to a page, it's it's not really my own thoughts. And if there is a poem that has my own thoughts, I can tell because I just know that it's just me speaking, you know, just or maybe me ranting about something really angrily, or me you know, roasting someone, if that's a
Yeah.
word to use.
Yeah.
But and for some of my newer poems that I'm writing right now, that's how some of them are, because I'm dealing with some of this pent up anger that I've had for all these years, which is
Mhm.
super fun. But you know, ultimately, at the end of the day, when I'm writing the captions or my books or the poetry that's inspired, it's always God working through me, and it's a very different feeling. But what's interesting to me is I feel like all artists have that capacity to do it. It all just comes down to, is that what you want to do? Like
Mhm.
everybody can write poetry, you know, anybody and everybody could do it if they want to. Where the true talent or anointing, if you want to call it, for the religious or spiritual people comes in, is where you allow it to be applied. So you know, like talent is just a raw talent of having the skill, but the anointing is like saying, okay, I don't want to talk anymore. I don't want to put anything that I have down. You just inspire me and put it on the page. And so, you know, I would say 9 times out of 10, that's what happens. The
Yep.
only one time it doesn't is, like I said, if I'm just in a real bad mood. I'm like, all right, someone made me mad today, and I got to write this down, and hopefully in the caption I'll be able to or you'll be able to smooth it all out, and we can
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it is interesting because it's that difference between like nature and nurture, you know, like the human nature or the natural nature versus the changing and the evolution of cultures, and who you decide to align yourself with, and your beliefs and your values and things like that. They all start to shift over, and that's a for I don't know if you have these audiences out there, but for those folks who are spiritual or not, it's like that constant battle between, you know, flesh and the spirit.
Mm.
It's a complex one, and it's very hard to fight, but it is very rewarding.
Mm. Like I'm fascinated on this whole concept, right? Because I think the more I think about it, the more I have conversations with different likes of people with different beliefs and different experiences and from different places, etc., etc., etc. The more like I see a gray area in the fact of the more like every it seems like everyone's the same. Like we all feel the same thing. We just call it different things. We all in the nucleus of ourselves of like we clearly are good people, we want to help other people, we just call it by different names. And I'm just fascinated of like taking the lessons from each individual aspect from people, like you said, like New Mexico. Like I've never been to New Mexico, so I'm not going to know what it's like. I'm not going to know what growing up there's like. I'm not going to have the same lessons as yourself has. But having a conversation with you, like you can learn those lessons. And I'm fascinated of like of hearing how people express themselves, hearing what they call their emotion, whether it is God, whether it's spirituality, whether it is just them saying, no, that's just kind of the way I am. I'm like, okay, cool. Like whether it's something else, like it's fascinating because if you look down to it, in my eyes anyway, if you dig deeper, everyone's saying the same thing. They're just using different vocabulary.
Yeah, it's true, and that is very interesting. Man, if people could think more like you these days, we'd have a lot less problems on our hands, you know?
uh,
Because I mean, not to flatter you, but you know, really, you know, like I feel like one of the biggest issues we have these days is that we don't we like ourselves don't understand that we're not the only human being on this planet. And there's just like a global thing that's going on these days. And it's kind of sad because you can learn a lot from other people. And you can, like you're doing, you go around and you say, well, how do you experience life? How do you express yourself based on your culture where you've grown up in? And it's going to be vastly different, even city to city. Like even here in New Mexico, if I go from Las Cruces to Silver City, the cultures are extremely different. And so if we had more people like you to just be like, well, everybody's going to be different. Everybody's going to have their own look on life and their own take on things. So I should be understanding of that and accept their expression because that's who they are. And there's a big debate to be had, I think, because there's some people who are like, okay, but like we all agree that this is inherently bad, right?
Yeah.
And like one of those things is, I don't know, cannibalism, I guess.
Yeah.
Like everybody can agree that that's probably, you shouldn't do that. But then you go to certain sections of like, the middle of the African coast or whatever, like these little islands where there's like cultures of people who have just survived up there and they're basically like living in our time 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
And they still practice it like as a part of their faith or something. And so you're like, what what's going on out there? So there's a huge debate to be had, like as to whether or not there's certain things that we should all just agree are inherently bad. And I think there's a lot of stuff we can agree on, but ultimately to get people to understand that, we have to understand each other. Like you can't explain something to someone who speaks only Spanish and English. You got to learn Spanish in order to reach them, because they're never going to know what you're talking about. And so in your efforts of going to understand the other cultures, you may be one of the few men on this planet who can actually explain each other to one another, because everybody else refuses to do so. It's very strange.
I don't know, man. I think it's the acknowledgement that a coin always has two sides. You know what I mean? There's a heads and a tails, like regardless.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how strongly you believe something, there's always going to be a counter argument. And also in the belief system of, if you hate something, like hate's a strong word, right? But if you hate something, it's usually because you are exactly what you hate. So you need to dig inside yourself to then figure out what's going on, why you don't necessarily agree with it, how you got there, blah blah blah. And then also just traveling around, right, and talking to people and being an observer, you see the same holes in different societies. You've seen the same holes, the same arguments, the same problems, the same bullshit, like in many, many different countries. Like, for example, I'm on the other side of the world. I'm literally the furthest I could get from home right now. And they're dealing with the same issues. It doesn't make any sense to me, because I'm like, the infrastructure is different, the landscape's different, the weather's different, the people are different, like the economy's based off something completely different, the class system's different. I don't understand why they're dealing with the same stuff. And you kind of be like, well, we can't really be that different then. We're all pretty much the same. We just like to think we are polar opposites and like to cause conflict. You know what I mean? It's like, maybe we should sit at the table and ask what it's like on the other side, or even just like go stand up, walk around the other side of the table and see the table from the other perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Like, yeah, it's perspectives. Those are also very interesting. I think that's a good point to loop back around to art, because like that's, I think, what's so amazing to me about art. And really in this context, I'm mostly referring to like painted works and like pictures, because everybody has their own perspective that they take to it. And there's a lot of people who are like, well, art is subjective. And then you look at a painting and everybody takes their own thing from it. And so if we can look at like a canvas with colors on it and understand, all agree like as a whole, yeah, there's different perspectives. There's different perspectives to this, and this is subjective based on your reality of life. And why can't we do that with reality? Like we're we're willing to believe in a piece of paper, but we can't like apply that to our own lives, which I think is pretty interesting. And I think that's why art and expression is so important, is
Mm,
because art reminds us of something deeper, something more emotionally profound, that reminds us that we're not all, we don't have to hate each other. We don't have to we don't have to start fights with every person that's in the room just
mm,
because they come from a certain background, or they look a certain way, or they're from a certain country, or they're associated with a certain person. Like, we don't have to do that. It's like we consciously choose to, or maybe want to. I don't know.
mm.
I can't really agree because I don't like to do that myself, but from my own observations of people in this world, that's what I kind of have taken away from it.
I was having a conversation yesterday and we got into the deeps of like, politics and all that type of shit. And it kind of meandered around so many different topics, but it kind of concluded with like conflict is inevitable, but it's not necessary.
Yeah,
It's like
that's it.
it's a really weird paradox because you're like, we're gonna do it. Like you can pretty much bet every single thing you have that it will happen. But is it 100% necessary? No. Like we don't have to do it, but we're probably gonna do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a pretty profound statement. It's interesting, huh, how we humans work.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
like, I mean, you know, like for myself, the immediate first thing that I think of is like, okay, everyone knows this story. Garden of Eden, right? God had a plan. Adam and Eve were in a perfect place, and it wasn't like the rest of the world falling into chaos as we know it now wasn't necessary. Like, God had a way it was going to come down, but it happened anyway because Eve just, like, she went in and did her thing, and here we are. So that it's like, it's an interesting statement, because that's like, basically, if you're a Christian like myself, then like hearing that, you connect it all the way back to like, that's the essence of humanity. That's like
Mm,
the very beginning of what human nature is, and what humanity was, is that we are conflict driven. And I think there's some goods to conflict. I think that once in a time, when people were a lot more sound minded and weren't as maybe stressed out as people are today, I feel like that's a big problem, is that people are just so anxious because we live in a world of like, go here, go there, do that, like constant, like boom, 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 boom. Social media is everything. You go scroll on Instagram and get lost for an hour because there's like 5 million videos, and you're just like, oh, okay, oh, I gotta go to school, I gotta go to work, oh my God. And like, everybody's so stressed out all the time. And back in a time when we weren't, and life was just life, people could easily sit down and like say, I don't agree with that. And then you have your conflict, and you're like,
mhm.
okay, well, now that we've had it, I see more where you're coming from, you see where I'm coming from, now we have a middle ground. And so conflict can be good, but nowadays I don't think so. Nowadays, if you get into conflict with somebody, you better you better have like a Glock in the back pocket or something, because you could you could get taken out. It could be your last day on earth. You better
Yeah.
quit messing around,
Yeah.
you know?
So talk to me about the book.
The book, yes. So I started writing The Price of Salvation a year ago, and it was a 2-year process, but it is finally, I believe, going to be out in 2 weeks. And The Price of Salvation is an American Western. It takes place in the state of Arizona in 1902, and it's the story of an outlaw who goes by the name of Thomas Saint Hart, and he's at the downward spiral, like almost the ending of the era of the American outlaw. So he's right at that point in American history where law and order started to take over, where you had the U.S. military more involved in the states, because they were going from territories to U.S. owned. And you had this ending of age where people like outlaws were basically like, they started to become nobodies. Like, they lost their sense of respect, in a sense, and their sense of being able to do even what they were doing to survive. And so um, we catch up with him here with his gang, who he is like his family, and he's thrown into a situation where he is forced to choose between is family, um, and faith and freedom. And so it's this huge battle between the three, and like what is all three of those subjects. So if I could ever like summarize the book into three words, it would be family, faith, and freedom. And those are the main concepts that it toys with. And it's this grandiose adventure with a wonderful cast of characters who go on this journey with him, and or vice versa. He goes on with them to go about that sense of self-discovery. And what is it? What is family really at the end of the day? And what is freedom really at the end of the day? And what is faith? What are all three of those things? What do they really really mean if you break them down to their most simplistic and brightest essence? And it's a wonderful story. I'm very proud of it. I would say it's probably the best work I may ever do. I don't know. I'll try to outdo myself in the sequel, but it may be the very best thing that I ever create. And it's a wonderfully beautiful story. And I hope that everybody who reads it enjoys it, because it took a lot of work.
Wow, what a great way to summarize it, man. Family, faith, and freedom. Like that's something that I can really get on board with. Like I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, and here's the great thing is that yes, I am a faithful person
Hmm.
and I am a Christian, but uh, I genuinely believe that the best way to reach people, or for God to reach people, is just to reach them naturally. So the book is not like, you're not going to read it and get preached at the whole time. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
The our heroes are not heroes, and our villains are not necessarily villains. And that's what I think is my favorite thing about it, is that if you can get on with the concept of family, faith, and freedom, then you're going to have a good time, because that's what it's about.
Hmm.
And what you decide to take away from all of that, and where you decide to see yourself in the book, is what it's about. And so don't worry, you're not going to get preached at the whole time, and you're not going to be told like, oh, repent you sinners, like that.
Yeah,
None of that. I
yeah.
don't like any of that stuff. It's just a good classic American Western tale. And you know, I hope you do enjoy it. You'll have to let me know whenever you read it what you think, so I
Well,
can put it
indeed.
down this thing.
Is it going to be on Amazon?
Yes, and it'll be an ebook format too. But if you want, you can buy it as a paperback as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, it'll be on there. I'll have it on my Instagram as well, so it'll be like on my shop, and you can go in there and click on the link, and I'll have the Amazon link and the Dorrance link, who's my publishing company, so that you can take a look at both and see which one you like.
Perfect. Yep. I'll be getting that paperback copy so it can sit on my shelf, like it's quite funny. Like I'm not the greatest of readers. Um and I'm not the greatest of writers either, to be honest. Like I was like 12 when I couldn't spell a single word at 12 years old. Um yeah,
Really?
it was bad, dude. Like I think I'd read 3 or 4 books by the age of like 22. Um yeah, man, like it was pretty difficult kind of thing for me to get on with. I don't know why. Like some people just learn at a slower speed, some people will learn at a quicker speed. We all have our traits, and faults. It is what it is. That's the hand I was dealt type thing. But yeah, I really take pride in myself of having a bookshelf and kind of be able to look over to me right and be like, yeah, you know what, I've read those. And it's yeah, it's definitely going to be sitting up there.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. And you know what? Don't even feel bad. I'll let you in on a little secret. I love to give Easter eggs whenever I do stuff like this. Here's something about me, okay? I hate to read.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And every time I say something, like every time I say that, that's the response I get, is like, "Wow, really? Like you write books, you hate to read." And I'm like, "Yeah, I hate to read. I can't stand reading it, because I have a bit of issue with reading. Like I get lost and my words will get mixed around
Hmm.
sometimes, so it's hard for me to do it. And so I just prefer to listen. But that's okay. You're gonna love this book then, because it was written for folks like you in mind. Because because I'm a person like you,
Yeah.
and I was like, I hate when there's these like gigantic books, and like 80% of it doesn't really matter. It's just there because the author's like, no, 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 you need to be invested in the world. I'm like, no, I give you the meat and potatoes, and just a little bit of gravy whenever it's needed, and you just have a great time and fly through it. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm glad it'll be on your bookshelf. Now I can be like, hey, there's this guy named Alex Thomas, and he he has my book on his bookshelf, and that is enough for me.
Yeah, that'd be really cool, man. Like it's a really cool feeling, you know, especially when that book travels across the world. It's a really surreal thing. That someone can pick it up regardless of you being able to see my face now. Like someone can pick it up and read it and you'd be like, holy shit, like I wrote that and now it's in a physical format and someone's picked that up and now is reading it. So we have like some sort of connection through a medium of words on a page. Like it's crazy. And then it also touches on something that you said like a couple of minutes ago with the thing of like, no matter, it doesn't matter if you kind of are religious, for example, right? It's your perception of it. Everyone's gonna everyone's gonna perceive it in a different way, which is why I love listening to people of like hearing their kind of take on the poetry I write, right? So I'm like, what did you get from it? They're like, oh well, you know, this, that, the other. Or there was just like, yeah, it was nice. I was like, okay, cool. Like, you know, like I'll never tell them what it's about. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's it's emotion, it's pain harnessed and written into words to get it out of my head so I don't go even more crazy than I already am. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's being able to like use that and then also connect with someone, like I'm saying, like you'd be able to connect with other people when once this book's out. And someone reads it and be like, holy shit, someone on the other side of the world in New Mexico like thinks the same way I think. I'm not a loner and a weirdo and like absolutely nuts. You know what I mean? There is someone else out there that kind of sees it the same way. Or you can think of it the adverse way and be like, oh, that's a different way that I would never have looked at before. And I'm like, that's fascinating. That's really interesting. I'm going to think about it in a different sense. And then you learn a little bit more and you turn the pages and you look at it from a different perspective. And I believe you kind of develop into a well-rounded human being, you know, if you always stay in the hometown thinking the same way, doing the same thing, like hanging out with the same people, like you're only ever going to be one-sided individual. Like wouldn't you want to be able to get everything you can from life and be like a well-rounded individual and experience everything so then you can sit down. Like I always think of sitting in a rocking chair when I'm like 80 years old with like a grandkid and be like, come here lad, like or lady, like I've got a story to tell, you know what I mean? And just like that's the way I make myself do shit. Like I'm a very I find it very easily to get really depressed. Like that's just the way my mind works. I'm very much of a thinker, and I can spiral down towards the bottom of a pit very, 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 very easily. And then I was also a very nervous kid, right? Which I thought was nerves, but as we develop, we then label it as other things. Um, but I think of it as like the way I make myself do shit is like do it for stories. You know, you want to be able to tell a good story, right? And it's an amazing thing because then people connect through stories.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Yeah, there's actually uh that's the only way that I process my life as well. It's interesting to know because like the more I hear you talk, the more I'm like, me and this guy are a lot alike. Because I've gone through a lot of those same things as well. But that's what fascinates me so much about stories is that there's just something so real and powerful about them. I mean, a lot of times people think about the Bible and they're like, oh well, it's the word of God, and it's like this great amazing thing, and it is, don't get me wrong, but what it is at its core is like one big story.
Mhm.
Like that's all it is. And sprinkled throughout, there's a bunch of other tinier stories that have like morals and meanings and messages and things that like help you to round out everything in your life. And so it's brilliant because yeah, I mean, the best way for us to connect with people is through these stories that we live and that we're given. And you know, sometimes our stories are only heard by like 50 people on the entire planet, which is like nothing, right? Like we think of like the what 9 billion people or something like that that are on the planet right now. I'm like only 50 people. I'm a worthless piece of garbage. But it's not true because there's something just so fascinatingly important about these stories that we share with one another. And even if it's just one person that you can reach and help and guide towards having a better life on this short trip on this planet that we have, I think that we've done a good job in existing. And so yeah, man, tell all the stories you can. Learn everything for all of us so that we have one guy who at least lived life to the best amount.
I see it like two points. First of all, you said 50 people, right? Put 50 people in a room and you'd be like, holy shit, that's a lot of people. You know what I
True.
mean? So you'd be like, I've been able to connect with all these people. 50 people is a lot of people. Like thinking of it as like the entire planet. Okay, no, like it's a drop in the ocean. But without each individual drop, there would be no ocean. So, we need those 50 people. And then second of all, I think of it as a different way. Like I think of it as a way of like the journey with yourself. You know what I mean? Rather than doing this journey for other people, if that's your motivation, that's incredible. Like do that. And I think that is definitely a massive slice of my cake of like if I ever have kids, to be able to pass on that knowledge. Even if I don't have kids, it doesn't matter. Being able to pass on the knowledge to peers around me, to someone that picks up the book and reads it and takes something from it. That's awesome. It doesn't matter about me, but it's also like the journey that we go on as individuals, right? And kind of been like, not selfishly, but I'm like, I want to figure out who the fuck I am, and then be like, okay, now I understand how I work. Now I can better understand how the world works and everyone else works. And you end up, I don't want to say changing the way you are or the way you act, but you can adapt to any situation in front of you, simply because you're not set in stone of like, no, I'm this type of person. Everyone else should like get out of my way because I'm an alpha male and all this type of shit. It's like, no, man, like everyone's just trying to live their life. And if you figure out, your positives and negatives and all that type of stuff, and figure out your natural reaction to things and more constructive reactions to things, you can better navigate your way through life, right? And then you can write a better story.
Yeah, that's what they're all about. Every good story comes from one great person's journey.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way of looking at it as well. I think yeah, we're like we're like the same opposites.
Mm.
Like you are more self focused. Like what's the term? Not eccentric. Well, I'll just say you're more like self-focused on like what does this journey and this story mean for me? And mine is like what does this journey and this story mean for others? And so it's really interesting to see those two like kind of like opposites click. Like my cake's empty slice of myself is filled up like by your
Mm-hmm.
slice of self.
Yin and yang, right?
Yeah, exactly. There we go. That's a good analogy.
There you
That
go.
was
Like
my brain was trying to put it together.
I,
But yeah, it's great.
I find it fascinating, man. Like you learn people's beliefs, right? Or you learn a little bit about people's beliefs because you're not going to have all the years they've plowed into it and all the experiences they plow into it. But you learn a little bit about their belief, right? And you're like, oh my God, like that's exactly what I believe. I just don't call it that name, or I've never heard that name before, or I just don't read that book, or I don't go to church. It's like, yeah, but you live the same way. So how can it be different? You know what I mean? And I find it being able to speak to people who, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Catholicism, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's Islam, whether it's they completely don't believe in anything, whether it's spirituality, whether it's Russian Orthodox, whatever the fuck it is. Like you
Russian
take,
Orthodox.
yeah, like you take the positive from it. And you're like, oh wow, like I really relate to that, blah blah blah. And I think religion as a whole at the moment has a really bad negative connotation for a lot of people because they just are very quick on the draw, start shooting from the hip and just being like, no, it's caused all this, this, and this. I was like, well, how can that cause something? Because it's a book. A book can't cause all that. It's our perception of said book and our perception and ignorance to be able to mold as individuals from different parts of the world, different experiences, different nature, different nurture. So why can't we just like, read all the books, figure them all out and be like, yeah, I like this, and this from these books. I'm going to take this, and this and adapt it into my own life. But I don't have to necessarily slap a label on me and be like, I'm part of said group. I was like, if you want to do that, that's incredible. If you don't, that's incredible too. But there is so much like positive to gain from this. And I think too many people are blind to it at the moment and just like disregard it. I'm like, nah, man, like you don't know, you've not experienced it. Like go speak to someone, like go sit in a church. If it's not for you, it's not for you. Like that's wicked. But take whatever you can from it and hopefully you're going to benefit from it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I have this saying, and for a long time I thought that I thought that it was pretty unorthodox, and I was like, I don't know if I can get away with saying this because, you know, I think I'm about to make the case for and against religion,
I'm ready.
which is why I say it's very unorthodox. Because my saying generally about life, when people ask me like, well, why should I be this or why should I be that, or why, like, what do you do, like what inspired, like why do you choose to be a Christian? My biggest thing is I always just say it's not about who you're a part of, or what like you identify with. It's not about some church or something. It's about um, being better than the worst that is out there, you know being better than evil. And it's a very general statement because it's true, like we all have to walk our own road, and that's going to be different for everyone. So I'm kind of like, I'm going to reiterate a little bit of what you said here. So I'm sorry for your viewers if this gets repetitive, but
No, go for it.
but being better than evil. And what does that mean? I don't. That's up to you to decide. I'm not supposed to do that. My job is to say, in my own my relationship with God, that is the greatest, greater than evil. And that's my own personal journey. Like that's for me. And so if that example can make someone go, well, I might be interested in that, then great. And if you find it and you like it, then that's fantastic. And the trouble, and here's now my thing for the case for and against religion. In the in the against, the hardest thing about people, like I can understand the people actually that say, well, look what religion did, look at how all these horrible things that it's caused. I can actually understand that because there's it's not necessarily, like you said, it's not necessarily the religion, it's the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
And the trouble with that is that you get um all these different faiths, right? There's like, I don't even know how many. I think there's like over 100,000, I think, or something like that. I haven't looked up that statistic in a while, but there's over 100,000 at least of faiths on this planet, and we're supposed to believe in one. Well, which one is it? And it gets even harder when you see people, even in the Christian community, I would say especially the Christian community, who go out there and they scream at everybody, and they're yelling and they're saying, like, don't do this, and you're wrong for this, and they start going off and off and off. And in a sense you can kind of respect it, because you're like, well, they're technically doing what they're told to do, but they're overzealous about it. That's where the problem comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And as a whole, for everyone, we're all very overzealous these days. There's a collective humanity, in
Good,
everything.
good and evil is down to perception. Like we can look at an act of human nature, and I could say it's good and you could say it's evil, and we both could have a lot of weight to our argument and have a really good constructive debate, and which isn't emotionally charged, and it will just come down to the way we see it. So it kind of blurs that line where it's like, okay, stay away from evil, do good, blah blah blah. And it's like, you know, people think they're doing good. It just it just doesn't kind of sit well with us, you know what I mean? Which then blurs the line. I'm a very critical thinker. I'm very like more philosophical, and like my mum is a very spiritual individual. Like she grew up in Northwest Africa, so has a lot of spirituality and juju, as she calls it, which is quote unquote black magic, as Westerners kind of, you know, depict black magic, because we are quite blind in the way we look at things and be like, no, that's not correct, but it can't be backed up by science yet. So it's, we're just going to push it off the table. And it's like, no, it's not about that. It's about like fucking thinking a little bit more into it. You can pull examples from like the Roman Empire, for example, where like uh philosophy was part of their training regimen, where you have to be a critical thinker. You think about things, um, and look at the advancements they made. You know what I mean? You look at any civilization that would sit down and be like, what do we need to do? And is that right for all people? And then what's my kind of perception of that? What do I think about that? And that's where the most amount of advancement comes, whether it's socially, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's emotionally, financially, whatever. Granted, a lot of bad things, quote unquote, from our perception. A lot of bad things can occur from it, but it's all down to the way you look at it, right? And I think it's always like, get a seat at the table for everyone from everywhere, and fucking hear their side and be like, okay. And it's weird though, because you never actually draw any conclusions. You're kind of stuck in this like the experiment, right? You get a donkey who's equally thirsty to hungry, and you put a bowl of water on one side and a bowl of food on the other. He won't move, because he'll be like, well, I'm exactly equally thirsty and exactly equally hungry, so I don't know which one to go through first. So you're kind of like stuck in this middle where you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do, because you can never please everyone. But at the same time, you're going to open your eyes to the world, and maybe you're going to be a little bit more knowledgeable.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that's exactly the point. Good and evil is as much as subjective as art is, which I think is a nice little tie-in, I guess.
Mm,
Now we've kind of gone almost full circle now. But yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And you've got all these great analogies. I need to remember like all of these, because they really are pretty. I really do like them a lot.
I
And yeah,
appreciate it,
I
man.
mean, yeah, no, thanks for having them in your brain. I have a really bad memory, so like I can't. I have a hard time memorizing things. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, um, we need each other. Really, we need the different perspectives, because in some way, shape, or form, they do matter, and they help us to either stay more grounded in what we already believe and know, or they allow us to evolve forward and find something new. And as a Christian, and I guess this is my argument for religion, so to speak, is we I have found something that I have deemed to be perfect, right? And I've actually read a few of the other books as well. I've read a few of the Catholic books and the Quran a bit, and studied a bit of Buddhism and things like that. Just to see. I'm like, what other people believe, and but ultimately, what it came down for me is I discovered that the Bible as a whole it's a perfect book. It doesn't contradict itself in any location, which is a really hard thing to figure out, because you really do got to study it out. Like you got to study it. And so for a lot of people, that might be a really outlandish statement, but if you actually dig into it and you really look for it, you'll understand that that's the truth. But that's just, again, that's why my argument for religion is like, it's not necessarily about the religion, it's about that relationship that you get with God personally. And since that's what the Bible is, that's what you're getting. You're developing on that. And so when we meet with other folks and we say, so what's your side of the things? In my experience, at least, it helps me to either understand, oh, this is how this person thinks. So maybe, um, I'll know this next time when I go to talk to someone who has the same belief system, and it helps me. And that allows me to evolve forward in how I talk to folks and how I present myself with folks, because you got to be so careful these days with how you do. One wrong word and you could start a fire, you know. And it's kind of, it's a little spooky, but on the other side, it's really good, because I really didn't, I heard what that person was saying, and I've thought about it, and I personally really didn't like it, but now I'm even more grounded in what I believe, because of maybe how outlandish this seemed over here, you know. And it's very rare I get something like that, but you hear some crazy person bouting on about who knows what.
Mm,
And you're like, well, that was insane, good thing I have this.
mm.
And so but it's a learning experience, and that's the beauty of it all, I guess, just being able to determine the subjectivity of not only reality but art as well. And I think that's why they say art imitates life, because it
I
just
think
is.
I think life is art. You know what I mean? It's an expression of of what? It's an expression of living things. It's an expression of energies. It's an expression of spirituality, if you want to call that. It's an expression of God, if you want to call that. It's an expression of whatever. You know, it's all like a depiction of something else, and it's the synergy of everything combined. And I think that's what humanity is, and it ties perfectly into life. Like it's everything combined. Like you can't have night without day, um and you can't have like black without white. You know, it's not going to work. You know, with the whole saying of, if you didn't feel sad you would never feel happiness, because you wouldn't know the difference, and it would just kind of be this mundane steady state. And it's true, it's the synergy between everything. It's everything combined is life. It's people arguing, it's people agreeing, it's everything together. That's can be summarized in four letters of life. And it's people try and force a square into a circular hole, and I'm like, that's not going to happen, man. Like there's
Yeah.
going to be differences, and we need to be able to open our eyes and listen with our ears and be like, okay, I'm going to take that good, I'm going to leave that bad in my perception, and I'm going to help it mold me going forward, because ultimately this is fucking life, and we don't know how long we're going to be here. We don't know if it's like reincarnation. You don't know if it's heaven and hell, whatever you fucking believe. You don't know if it's just eternal darkness and we don't know anything. You don't know if you're going to be transformed into some sort of spiritual form or whatever. Like at the end of the day, we don't know. That's all faith. All right. We have no definitive answer. All right. So it's just like, do whatever do whatever you think's best in the time that we're here, but don't shut out other people's judgment and other people's way of thinking, because they're going to think differently and be like, okay, cool, that's wicked. All right. And if I'd ever give any piece of advice to anyone, is like, leave your hometown. Like pick yourself up, go chuck yourself in the deep end, not literally, of like a different city, a different country, a different place or whatever. Just and then go like talk to people of the locals and like actually have some decent conversations, not just like, how do you take your coffee? I mean, like, what's the meaning of life, and what do you believe, and what faith do you have, and what's your experiences and life lessons and shit like that. And like you'll figure out that it could be polar opposite, but polar opposites, and on the other side of like um a linear scale, it's polar opposites is usually a circle, which means they're quite fucking similar in core values. Same with politics, which don't get me involved in that. Like I just want to bang my head against the bloody wall because they're all the fucking same. Um and you just be like, oh wow, I can draw parallels from that and I can gain from that. And then you go back to your hometown and you're like, well, I've got all this experience, and then you can pass it on through a bloody story. There you go. That's life. High five. You made it to your end. Congratulations. If there's something else, I'll see you there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a perfect way to look at it.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
Brother, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to get to talk with you and hear your thoughts and actually get to know you. I've seen you a few times on my Instagram, but you know, think thanks for thinking of me, for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Um, like I said, man, like when I started this, like it's the slogan, I'd say the motto is the lifestyle of fitness, but fitness, what is fitness? You know, there's many different definitions of that. Like fitness also ties in wellness. What is wellness? Like spiritual, mental, physical, financial, sexual, like everything comes in together. And I think it should be a melting pot of conversations of so many different topics, right? And just hearing people, and like I said, from different places, different beliefs, different backgrounds. And like if anything, or if nothing else comes from this, I've learned something from you, and I'll get a book out of it because I'll be able to fucking buy it whenever it comes up.
Yeah, there you
uh,
go.
which will be mega. And again, I'll learn something from that. And it's just like it is break down barriers, right? Break down these groups that we like to put ourselves in. It's like it doesn't matter no more. Like I've literally always said, like, I don't care what you call me, like as in a name. Like I don't really care about anything. Like it's just that doesn't depict who I am. Like that name doesn't depict who they are, because they could be, I don't know, English, but not relate to any culture of the English people. You know, it doesn't matter. Like it's breaking down those barriers, having a conversation, learning something, and chatting some shit.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Awesome, man. Well,
All
that's
right, man.
awesome.
Uh,
Uh,
keep me updated whenever the book comes out, man.
yeah, for sure. I'll if I can remember, I will definitely message you at
Mhm.
like the moment I figure out. But if not, it'll be the moment it comes out. It'll be all over my Instagram. So it's
Perfect.
hopefully it won't be too hard for you to miss. But
Perfect.
I will definitely try to remember. If I don't, it's something personal. It's
That's
just
okay.
like I said, my memory is like I get just so distracted by everything.
That's
But
all right, man. I'm the same. Like I can't remember how old I am, so it's fine.
oh, nice. It's okay. Time is relative. Age doesn't matter.
That's very true. That's very true. Brother, I appreciate it. You have a cracking day, man.
Thanks, Alex. You too. Until next time. I guess we'll see you.
All right, man. Take it easy.